أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Picking up with the legendary ideology of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the era of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. After completing several dozens, hundreds actually, of videos on the legendary military career, as well as the legendary military legacy and the legendary military government, as well as the legendary military empire of Sayyidina Muhammadur Rasulullah, Madinatul Ilm, the city of knowledge, the eras of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, the era of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, and the era of Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan radiyallahu anhu. And now here we are at the door of the city of knowledge, the era of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu, the legendary military ideology of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself. Picking up from page number 477, the bulletin is 2.2, discussing features of the judiciary at the time of the rightfully guided Khalifas. The judiciary at the time of the righteously guided Khalifas, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on all of them, represented the second stage after that of the prophetic era, which formed the roots and foundations. On the one hand, it represented the complete structure and comprehensive system. On the other hand, it gave an excellent image of the Islamic judiciary. It is regarded as an example and a model, a focal point for all subsequent eras. We may sum up the most important distinguishing features of the judiciary at the time of the righteously guided Khalifas. May Allah Ta'ala be pleased with them all as follows. Number one, the judiciary at the time was a continuation of the way it was at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. It adhered to and followed its method. Religious education was widespread, and the people were strongly connected to the faith and correct beliefs. There was a strong religious awareness and simplicity in the way claims and cases were dealt with, and judicial procedures were straightforward. There were few claims and disputes in relations to the size of the state and the number of people and countries it encompassed. Judges were chosen carefully and had all the qualities required to fill this position. Number two, the judges then are regarded as giving a true and sound image of the Islamic judiciary. Hence, that era became a reference point for the researchers and Muslim jurists. Their judicial rulings and systems became a source of Sharia rulings, judicial opinions, and interpretations of Islamic law throughout the ages on the basis of consensus, at least theoretically, among all scholars and school of thought, even though there are some differences in some details. An example of that is the difference among the imams as to whether the view of a companion, may Allah Jalla Jalaluhu be pleased with him or her, may be used as evidence or not, as is discussed in the fields of principles of Islamic jurisprudence, classification of hadith, and the history of legislation. We will discuss that below. Number three, the righteously guided caliphs and some of the regional governors examined some disputes and were in charge of the judiciary, in addition to other gubernatorial duties or governorial duties. They paid careful attention to dealing with disputes between people and inspecting the marketplaces. Number 4, in most cities, the Muslimin, the righteous, guided Khalifas appointed judges whose main job was to judge between people in exclusion of other duties. For the first time in a primitive form otherwise, there appeared the separation of judiciary authority from other forms of authority. In the major cities where judges were appointed alongside the governors had no authority in judiciary matters. In the other cities and regions, the governors were in charge of both the judiciary and the other matters involving governing, and they were under the supervision of the rightfully guided Khalif at the time, the Amirul Mu'mineen or Khalifatul Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Number 5, judges at the time of the righteously guided caliphs had to work out their verdicts, so they would look at the text of the Quran and Sunnah directly and reach their conclusions on the basis of what they understood. If they did not find any ruling applying to an incident, they would examine precedents and consult their contemporary scholars to try to reach a conclusion on the basis of what they understood. And then they would issue the rulings that they had reached by those efforts. Number 6, new sources for the judiciary appeared at the time of the righteously guided caliphs as a result of the method to which they adhered, which is outlined above. Now the sources of judiciary rulings were the Quran, the Sunnah, consensus, analogy, legal precedents, and individual opinion combined with consultation. Number 7, a precise administrative system for the judiciary was developed during the time of both Umar ibn al-Khattab and Ali ibn Abi Talib. May Allah Ta'ala Jalla Jalaluhu be pleased with them both. Sent well-known letters to the judges and governors highlighting the judiciary system and explaining its constitution and methods. In addition to these letters, the caliphs followed up with the judges and monitored them. They discussed issues with them, asked how they were doing, and found out how they were handling their cases. They also asked them to refer difficult and serious cases to them. This involvement, reached a peak at the time of Umar bin al-Khattab, but decreased a little during the time of Uthman bin Affan radiyallahu anhuma. It weakened at the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu as a result of the turmoil and civil war, as well as the emergence of autonomous trend in Syria and the consequences to which it led, in addition to the development of a number of power bases. Number 8, the qualifications of the judges were general in most cases and covered all incidents. The authority of the judge was comprehensive and he had complete freedom in decision making. Later during that era, there emerged the beginning of specifications or specializations among judges. Certain judges would be appointed to deal with simple and straightforward cases, and others would be appointed to deal with serious cases and major issues. Most of the caliphs continued to examine cases of criminal acts and had punishment, even though some of the governors did that too. This era also saw the appointment of multiple judges at one time in the larger cities and provinces such as Medina, Kufa, Basra, and Yemen. Military judges also were appointed for the first time. Number 9, during this era, they continued to follow the way of the prophetic era in supervising and checking judicial verdicts and approving those that were in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah and the Sunnah of the Quran, and those which were based on personal efforts and opinion. A personal view and interpretation cannot be cancelled out by means of another personal view and interpretation, but it may be cancelled out if it is contrary to the Quran and the Sunnah. Number 10, regular salaries for judges were introduced to make their lives comfortable, and courthouses and prisons were set up. For the first time, we see the reluctance of the senior companions to be appointed as judges. Ibn Umar was asked by Uthman to serve as a judge, but he refused. Ka'b ibn Yasir ibn Dana'a was asked by Umar ibn al-Khattab to serve as a judge in Egypt, but he also, radiallahu anhu, refused. It was also said that he accepted for a few days, or he accepted it for a few days, then he withdrew. Number 11, judicial procedures at this time were simple and straightforward. They involved only a few steps, starting with listening to the case, then establishing proof and evidence, issuing the verdict, and finally carrying out the verdict. Attention was paid to the etiquette of judging so as to predict or as to protect the weak, support those who had been wrong, ensure equal treatment of disputants, establish the truth, and implement Sharia laws for all people, even if the ruling went against the Khalif, Amir, or governor. In most cases, the judge would carry out the ruling himself if other parties involved would not do so willingly. The ruling would be carried out immediately after issuing the verdict. However, it seems that at the time of the righteously guided caliphs, many new procedures and organizational details were introduced. Scribes for judges were introduced at the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. The police and helpers for the judge and governors appeared at the time of Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu, and this system of criminal investigation developed at the time of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, the door of the city of knowledge radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he separated the witnesses in order to find out the truth. This method became an example to be followed. Inshallah, we will stop it here on page number 481. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسم ربك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.